Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. In the face of overwhelming odds, can a desperate humanity outwit a formidable alien empire with the art of deception? Let's get into the story. The bridge of the human flagship Aegis was a sight to set any person in awe. The sleek new warship was awash with officers going about their duties. Admiral Bazin stared at the holographic projection of the Astrakhan fleet, a monstrous swarm of insects blotting out the stars. They were the scourge of the known galaxy, ruthlessly enslaving species and leeching their planets dry of resources. Only a few years ago, humanity had blindly stumbled into this galactic nightmare and discovered, much to their horror, what true evil looked like. Compared to the Azrakans, humans were infants stumbling into a war zone, yet the images of devastated worlds, of entire alien races broken and chained, fueled a fire Bazin had never known. A desperate, reckless fire. Earth, humanity's cradle, now stood as the final target in the Astrakhan path of conquest. This was their final stand, the last bulwark against galactic enslavement. Today, mankind was turning up and ready to roll with the punches. "Admiral," his chief strategist, Commander Marshall, broke the tense silence, a veteran of countless skirmishes they'd fought. His voice was steady and his eyes were shadowed by the terrible knowledge of Astrakhan might. "The Trojan Horse is prepped and the Decoy fleet is in position." Bazin nodded, his gaze fixed on the monstrous ship dominating the display. It dwarfed any human vessel ever built. Lacking the usual bristling armament, it made up for in sheer size, impenetrable armor, and redundant shield systems. Built purely to withstand, defend, and protect, it was an irresistible target, a beacon of false strength, the perfect bait. This massive, lumbering behemoth was the centerpiece of humanity's last desperate plan, one born out of a defiance that burned hotter than the Astrakhan's coldly calculated aggression. Bazin, knowing he needed all the people he had, only had a skeleton crew manning the Trojan. "Let's light this candle," Bazin said, his voice low. He glanced at the Marshal, saw the steely resolve reflected in his eyes. This was a gamble, a final throw of the dice against an unwinnable war. But the alternative, the enslavement of Earth, was unthinkable. If they were going down, they would be going down swinging. Bazin keyed in the activation sequence. The Trojan lurched forward, its escort of smaller, nimbler warships surrounding the Trojan to make the ruse even more believable. Orders to evade until the trap had been sprung. Every eye on the Aegis watched as their audacious deception crawled into position. Forward until it reached the Astrakhan's fleet's firing range. The trap was set. For long, agonizing minutes, there was nothing. Bazin could see the faint shimmer of suspicion within the enemy ranks. Apprehension, maybe, or just the calm before the storm. Surely the Azrakans, seasoned in the art of war, wouldn't fall so easily. Yet there it was, an overconfident arrogance born from countless victories, a sense of superiority that made them underestimate humanity's desperation. The Trojan was too tempting. To many, it would be appropriate to see it as the flagship, and breaking it would break the human spirit. Suddenly, the Astrakhan fleet began to shift, their capital ships bristling with weapons capable of reducing entire planets to cinders, wheeled about like predatory sharks drawn to the scent of blood. The Trojan Horse was too tantalizing, too symbolic of human defiance to be ignored for long. They would crush this vessel, break the spirit of these upstarts. "They're taking the bait," Marshall murmured, a ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his lips. The holographic projection pulsed as the first wave of Astrakhan fighters screeched towards Bazin's Decoy. Weapon systems let loose on the Trojan and its escorts. "Phase 2, he commanded. The tension on the bridge was suffocating, a thick blanket laced with adrenaline and the cold sweat of calculated risk. This was it. The die was cast. Failure could mean the extinction of the human race. Orders given to the fleet, Marshall relayed. "Phase 2, activate over comms." The command deck filled with officers directing their subordinates, directing the fleet. It was beautiful. Bazin was the conductor and his orchestra was his fleet. All around the ambush zone, ships flickered into existence, the telltale shimmer of cloaking devices dissipating and further ships hidden behind a nearby moon roared into position. Basin's reserve fleet had spent months carefully concealed within asteroid fields and near the coronas of distant stars, painstakingly masked from Astrakhan's sensors. Now they revealed themselves, a constellation of human warships materializing from the void. They had taken the Astrakhan focus on the Trojan Horse and used it against them. The star system they had chosen was perfect for this ambush, containing a small, inhabited planet enslaved by the Astrakhans, but enough gas giants, moons, and asteroids to contain the fleet without detection. Sweet Mother of Mercy. Basin breathed, his eyes wide. Despite planning it, even he was momentarily awestruck. Humanity had emptied its shipyards, scraped every resource and piece of scavenged technology, and gambled the entirety of its future in this single, explosive moment. To face an enemy of overwhelming strength, they'd embraced the art of deception, the thrill of the unexpected. They had become the hunters. On Basin's orders, the first volley of missiles, cloaked and undetected, surged forward. They painted a brilliant canvas of destruction against the Astrakhan lines, slicing through shields and shredding fighters with merciless efficiency. This was not a battle. It was a reckoning. But the Astrakhans wouldn't break so easily. Their initial shock dissolved into seething fury. Basin watched the holographic display as capital ships wheeled about, massive cannons spitting death towards his reserve fleet. Human ships buckled, some exploding into brilliant fireballs. The enemy, enraged, was finally fighting with its full, terrible force. This is the moment he had dreaded. "Sir, the Trojan Horse is taking heavy fire!" Marshall's voice was strained but unwavering. The behemoth was meant to take a beating, but it was being pummeled. "Just a bit more," Basin muttered under his breath. "Activate Phase 3, Basin ordered grimly. This is the point of no return. All or nothing. This was not just a few cards. This was his whole hand. At the edge of the system, a ripple passed through the fabric of space. Warships. Dozens of them warped into existence from the hidden jump point. The Astrakhans, fixated on the decoy, hadn't even monitored this sector, and their reinforcements, scattered across occupied worlds, were light years away. It was humanity's final reserve, held back out of sheer desperation. Basin had known that even this surprise might not be enough. In a straight fight, the Astrakhans were simply too powerful, and yet the sight of this final surge of defiance, this burning star of human determination, sent a shiver down his spine. "Admiral," Marshall began, then hesitated. "They're hailing us. The Astrakhans." Basin stared at him, then let out a ragged breath that was almost a laugh. Even cornered, these monsters were too arrogant to plead. "Open the channel." The bridge fell silent as a towering, multi-limbed Astrakhan filled the main display. Its eyes glittered with a cold fury that mirrored Basin's own determination. "You primitives!" It snarled, its translator barely keeping up with the hisses and clicks of its language. "You dare challenge the might of the Empire! Your world will burn! Your species will be nothing but dust scattered amongst the stars!" "You made a mistake," Basin replied, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "You underestimated us, mistook our caution for weakness." He paused, the images of the destroyed worlds, of the broken races flashing through his mind. He thought of Earth, blue and green against the void of space, and a fierce anger ignited within him. "You enslaved, you destroyed, and you thought you'd won." Across the bridge, officers and crew members stared at their admiral, pride warring with terror. This was insanity, defying an enemy that could vaporize them in an instant. It was desperation, the desperate courage of the cornered. It was defiance, a raw, visceral thing that swelled in the human heart. The Astrakhan snarled, its mandibles working soundlessly. "You have achieved nothing! We are the Astrakhan Empire, and we will crush you as we have crushed countless others before." You will try, Bazin countered. Around him, the bridge hummed with activity. Each volley they sent, each enemy ship decimated, was a calculated gamble. But what was surrender? It was simply a slower, more agonizing death. The battle raged around them, a storm of destruction and dazzling maneuvers. The Astrakhan commander was staring at him, its many eyes reflecting the chaos of the battle in miniature. And for that one chilling instant, Bazin saw something flicker in those alien eyes. A flicker of something that was almost doubt. He disappeared from the screen as the flagship took a massive hit from a dreadnought. Stumbling from the screen, Astrakhan's screams the last thing emitted from the transmission. "Incoming transmission, Admiral!" Marshall cut through with his thoughts, his voice a lifeline to the brutal reality of the here and now. "Allied frequencies, but it's not in any language I recognize." Bazin frowned. "Patch it through." A series of clicks, whistles, and strange warbling sounds filled the bridge. All eyes flickered towards the Admiral. Bazin's pulse throbbed in his temple. Allied frequencies, but there were no other free races nearby. The enslaved ones? Could it be? "Sir, I'm getting a translation matrix through," his comm officer announced, bewildered. "They're the Meekin, I think. One of the conquered species. The signal is emanating from the planet in this solar system." A tense silence settled over the bridge as the warbling translated itself into heavily accented English.
"Greetings, humans. This is Elder Kirik of the Meekan. We see your courage. It gives us hope."
The bridge erupted in a cacophony of gasps and murmurs. Hope from one of the broken, enslaved races? Bazin stared at the display, momentarily speechless.
"We have watched your fight,"
the Meekan elder continued, his voice trembling slightly.
"Our spirits were crushed. But you fight like your world is worth saving."
The alien paused, as though gathering strength.
"The Askirans strip mined our planet, took our young to labor in the forges of their war machine. We thought there was no way out of the darkness."
Bazin's heart thudded painfully, to think that their reckless gamble was reigniting hope in this crushed race. "Tell us how to help," he said roughly, his voice echoing the determination in Elder Kirak's words. Hey everybody, sorry for interrupting the video, but thank you so much for all your support so far. And if you're watching this video and you are not subscribed, please hit that button to support us today. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get back to the video.
"They hold us here, on our own world,"
the elder began, and Bazin felt a fresh surge of anger. The indignity of it, enslaved on their very own home.
"Our numbers are vast, but their weapons keep us bound."
He hesitated.
"But we are not defenseless. They trust us to maintain the orbital stations, the communication arrays, the very systems they use to project their tyranny across the stars."
A spark of understanding flared in Bazin's mind. If they could exploit this, your people can disrupt their systems?
"It carries great risk,"
the elder warned.
"But yes, for a short time, we may be able to blind them, disrupt their coordination."
Bazin closed his eyes, the pieces of a desperate, insane plan clicking into place. It was a long shot, a plan based on the courage of a species they barely knew. But then he opened his eyes. Wasn't that what he'd been relying on all along? The courage to defy the odds? "Elder Kirak," he said, his voice ringing clear across the bridge. "We give you the order. Free your people. We will stand by you." He turned to Marshall and the tactical crew. "Rework the plan. Get Beta Squadron down to the planet and focus fire in the Askiran orbital infrastructure. We're going to turn their control into chaos." They had ignored the planet, thinking it was little more than a reason to get the Askiran's attendance. It was turning out to be a trump card he didn't realize he had. A tremor, something like anticipation, rippled through the bridge. Humanity, the newcomer to this galactic war, the underdog, was about to unleash the might of those who had been shackled for far too long. Chaos reigned. The disciplined Astrakhan battle formations were in disarray as their command chains sputtered and died. Communications from the planet were causing havoc in the Askiran systems. The planet, previously providing support and analysis from a safe distance, was now providing false information, incorrect commands, and with this they sent a virus to the fleet, a parting present from the Mirkan. Systems meant to be the eyes and ears of the Askirans now unable to display anything other than system error, unable to connect. Please contact support for assistance.
They're blind!
Commander Marshall shouted from his tactical station.
Their communications are in shambles! Squadrons are cut off from Central Command!
Bazin pressed the advantage. Humanity, he broadcasted over fleet frequencies, every word dripping with iron resolve. This is our moment. Our brothers and sisters of the Mirkan rise to break their chains. Now we finish this! He turned to the crew. Target their infrastructure, orbital shipyards, command centers, cripple them! The human fleet, seizing the momentum, surged forward with a single-minded intensity Bazin had only dreamed of. They had turned the tide not simply with cunning tactics, but by igniting a spark of rebellion in the hearts of the enslaved. It was messy, chaotic, and so very human. The fighting was fierce still, even with the trump card. Warships on both sides imploded. Reports coming into Bazin of the ensuing battle, the Trojans still active. The fleet, however, had lost over half its ships even with all the traps set. The Askiran had more devastated losses, but their flagship was still active. Weapons still pummeling the human fleet. Bazin needed something to end this now before his fleet was crippled and unable to recover before the Azrakans churned out another fleet. Meanwhile, the holographic display flickered with new updates. "Sir," a sensor officer shouted, "I'm getting a strange energy reading from the Mirkan homeworld. They're overloading something." "Overloading what?" Bazin snapped. He watched in horror as the massive energy signature dwarfed anything the Mirkan should be able to generate. Had they miscalculated? Was this some sort of suicidal last stand? Elder Kirek's grainy image once again filled the bridge view screen.
Forgive us, humans. We are being driven back, no longer able to hold the planet,
he rasped, his many eyes filled with a desperate determination.
For centuries, we have waited for a chance, however slim, and you have given it to us. Our engineers, they are overloading the planetary shield network. It was meant to guard us, but we will use it to wipe the Askiran presence from our skies. This is our only choice. Let it be to assist you and free our chained brethren.
Bazin gaped, a chill running down his spine. This wasn't a mere rebellion. It was a sacrifice of unimaginable magnitude. Elder, he began, struggling to find the right words, but Kirek cut him off.
Your courage lit the spark. Now, we will fuel the fire. Humanity, live free. Remember the Mirkan.
And with those final words, the transmission cut out. The energy signature on the display spiked, growing impossibly bright. Bazin stared, heart pounding as a blinding flash seared away the image of the Mirkan homeworld. When the view cleared, the void where a planet had been was punctuated by the drifting wreckage of what had once been the Askiran occupation force. A sense of awe, terrible and beautiful, swept through the Aegis. The Mirkan had not just rebelled, they had sacrificed their world to ignite the inferno of liberation. Bazin closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a line through the soot on his cheek.
Admiral,
Marshall said quietly, breaking the somber silence on the bridge.
This frees up Beta Force. What's your command?
Bazin, steely-eyed.
Deliver a payload on the damn flagship. I'll be damned before I waste the opportunity the Meerkans have provided.
Commands delivered. Commanders resumed to duties after the shock. A moment later, communication from Beta Force's commander. Payload delivered, Admiral. The command deck watched as the flagship turned into a flash of light before disappearing from the space it had once inhabited. The Azkurans, now beaten. Their last hope had just gone up like a firework, and now all the guns were pointing towards them. It was no longer a battle, but a slaughterhouse, and the Azkurans were livestock for slaughter.
Admiral, communications coming in. The Azkurans are surrendering. We've broken them.
Marshall delivered the message with a sigh of relief. Bazin opened his eyes, a weary smile gracing his battle-worn face. Well then, perhaps it's time we taught these monsters the meaning of mercy. Bazin looked around at his crew, their faces pale and lined with exhaustion, yet etched with the fierce joy of the fight. They were far from victorious yet, but in this single battle the tide had irrevocably turned. Humanity had paid the price already. The losses suffered were staggering, yet there was a new light in the eyes of his people, a hard-won certainty. The Azkuran Empire would fall. It was no longer a question of if, but simply when. Signal the fleet, Bazin said, the weight of command settling onto his shoulders once more. Secure the system, aid any survivors, Azkuran or Meerkan. Then we find the next battlefield. The crew around him stirred into motion, their movements purposeful, fueled by a strange mix of sorrow and exhilaration. They carried the weight of the Meerkan's sacrifice, an unspoken promise now etched upon their souls. The battle had stretched humanity, not only physically, but mentally. A whole world sacrificed for their gambit. Word spread of humanity's pivotal victory. Whispers turned into shouts of hope across the broken worlds under Azkuran rule. The Trojan Horse, once a desperate gambit, became a symbol of defiant cunning. The Azkuran Empire was in pieces, their fleet decimated, rebellions emerging from long subjugated planets, and now unable to produce resources and weaponry to repel humans and their allies. Outnumbered and outgunned, humanity, through their desperation and valor, lit the beacon of freedom. And though the war raged on, every battle, every planet liberated would bear the name of Meerkan, a reminder of the courage to sacrifice everything for the chance at a better tomorrow. The battle-scarred human fleet, now a mix of battered warships and cobbled-together vessels salvaged from the wreckage of war, became a mobile command center. It became a haven for the liberated, a rallying point for the downtrodden. They flew to forgotten outposts and hidden bases, those places crushed under the relentless advance of the Azkuran Empire years before, where embers of defiance still stubbornly glowed. These were not proud warrior races, but scavengers, technicians, those accustomed to existing in the shadows. It was a desperate patchwork alliance, born from the shared fires of oppression. The new alliances and rebellions funding the humans' war for freedom, recruits from every known race flocking to fill gaps in the human war machines. Once subjugated mining planets and shipyards now started turning out materials and ships for Bazin's fleet. Bazin stood before a gathering of these newfound allies. Strange faces stared back at him. The insectile Thrax, with their ability to repair almost any technology. Their spindly bodies hunched under the weight of a millennia of servitude. The bulky and resilient Gron, gifted miners that the Azkurans had turned into glorified laborers for their insatiable war machine. It was a bizarre gathering, yet bound together by a shared purpose, an almost desperate hunger for freedom. We have destroyed the Azkuran's main fleet. Now, it's time to break the shackles and tear down the Empire, Bazin admitted bluntly, looking around the faces, each etched with a mixture of fear and determination. For the Meerkan! For freedom! A thundering sound came from the crowd in agreement and appreciation of all that had been sacrificed and lost. He raised a hand to silence them. Remember the Trojan Horse, he pressed on.
We have set the galaxy on the path to freedom. Let it be known throughout that humanity and their allies will bring justice to anyone and everyone who tries to take our hard-fought freedom away.
He took a deep breath, committing himself fully.
The galaxy is free. Free from tyranny.
It was met with a deafening cheer. Humanity now at the forefront of freedom. Races once subjugated looked to humanity as saviors. Bazin watched as the Azkiran Empire crumbled beneath humanity's resolve and a new world order emerged, led by humans. The Republic, now overseeing peace and freedom, built on the back of humanity's defiance to forge a free galaxy. Finally, Bazin had achieved freedom, not only for humanity, but for everyone. He retired not long after, his uniform stored neatly in a storage box. Stored away, but available if someone threatened freedom again.